Welcome everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're calling from. My name is Rania Kosti, and I'm the director of the Inter-Academy Partnership Secretariat Office based in Washington, D.C., and hosted by the U.S. National Academies. Also on the call, I see Peter McGrath, my counterpart from the IAP-GYA-ISC Secretariat, hosted by the World Academy of Sciences. I have the pleasure of welcoming all of you here today to the presentation of the new report that IAP worked collaboratively with the International Science Council and the Global Young Academy on the topic of re-evaluation of research assessment. This is a topic that IAP, ISC, and GYA collaboratively have been engaged with for over 2 years. First, with the issuance of what we call the Orange Report, or the first Orange Report on the future of research evaluation. And today we will be talking about the second Orange Report again, with the title Snapshots of Reform, which is based on efforts and activities that our membership has been working on. Before I ask everyone kindly to perhaps introduce yourselves by putting your name and affiliation. Actually, you don't need to put your name, your affiliation and where you're based in the chat box as a way of introducing each other. I want to give an opportunity to Vanessa McBride from IAC and Beate Wagner from GYA to wave. They are the two colleagues that we have been working very closely on this project together. To carry out the work that you will hear more about today, we contracted with a terrific team called Culture Base that is based in the United Kingdom. And we have here Ben Bleasdale, who will be presenting on the methodology. And then we will have Carlo Di Politi, who was a working group member, working very closely for both reports, actually, one way or another, and he will be providing a summary of the key findings. Our goal is to have sufficient time. If everything goes according to plan, we will have about 30 minutes for discussion. What we want to hear is the views, opinions, reactions from members of the IAP, IAC, and GYA, and perhaps come out of this meeting with some next steps. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to Ben to maybe more formally introduce himself and then describe to us the methodology of the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rania, and a real pleasure to speak to everybody today. So just to introduce myself, I'm Dr. Ben Bleasdale, and as Rania's mentioned, I work for Culture Base, which is an agency that's based in the UK. We support a whole range of different types of organizations to look at aspects of what's often called research culture, so the working environment, which affects how research is done and the impacts it has. And we were really excited to partner with the three organizations on this particular topic about researcher assessment, given that it's really at the heart of so much of how the research system happens, how researchers are assessed, rewarded, promoted, what impact their research has. And I think it really sits at the nexus of an enormous number of challenges that the research sector faces over the years to come. So we were really pleased to be able to dive into the experience and the progress being made on reforming researcher assessment across different parts of the world, and to be able to do that through the combined membership of the three organizations, which is a fantastic reach to be able to look across at different types of organizations, different contexts, and to really understand how they were assessing and tackling some of these challenges. So as I say, we're really pleased to have kind of engaged with this. And I don't know, Carlo, if you wanted to lead us into a bit of a discussion about the kind of framing of the report before I talk a little bit more about the methodology.
Yes, so thanks a lot, Ben. And I will not, well, I will jump in with the others saying really thank you to your organization and yourself for the splendid support. I'm Carlo Di Politi from Sapienza University of Rome and representing today the Global Young Academy. I have taken the liberty of, I hope everybody can see the presentation, of adding to some of the things that already Ben has been talking with us in internal debates among the scoping group of the three organizations, the International Science Council, the Inter-Academy Partnership, and the Global Young Academy. I will briefly, hopefully briefly, with Ben summarize the main report, concludes with some personal observations in order to see if this can lead to a meaningful debate. So just very quickly, in order to introduce, I will be mostly talking about the results the way I see them. Ben has been so nice to agree to talk with us about the methodology of the report. So to give you very briefly the context, the three organizations have started working together a couple of years ago. As Rani already mentioned, we did publish a first joint report that you can easily find online. The report contains a review of the literature on why should we need a reform of research assessment and what the three organizations could do in principle together working for this objective. The four main conclusions you see in these slides: sharing good practices, leading by example, building partnerships, and providing intellectual leadership. It was explicitly mentioned in this report that one of the first steps should have been about asking ourselves what our own members organizations doing. Just a very quick disclaimer, the Global Young Academy actually has not organizations as members. We only have individuals, but for ease of for simplicity, let's just call them members in all cases here. And the outcome of this first exercise in understanding what our organization is doing is this report that we are presenting today. The report focuses on the evaluation of researchers specifically, so not the whole field of research evaluation. And it focuses on the networks and the membership of the Inter-Academy Partnership, the International Science Council, and the Global Young Academy. And as I mentioned, Ben will now talk to us, explain briefly how was it conducted.
Thanks, Carlo. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the kind of different phases of the work that have really kind of informed the report. There are three core parts of how we delivered this evidence. We, first of all, undertook a whole series of desk-based research, which was to really look across different, public-facing presences of different organizations across the combined membership. So looking at websites, online publications, and really trying to take an audit of those. But then also looking more broadly at wider resources, things like the DORA resource library and others, as really good kind of collated assets, looking at this particular topic of assessment. Using that and kind of building from that, we launched a survey which went out to the entire of the combined networks, so many hundreds of organizations. And this was really to ask about on-the-ground experience with researcher assessment, where organizations were engaging with it, what their ambitions were, what progress they'd made with it, what perhaps motivations and drivers and what goals they hope to achieve. And that was really, really helpful in terms of giving us a really rich set of data to look at. I will note that, of course, this is a voluntary survey, and we were very, very grateful to have over 50 respondees. That's given us a really good insight into the range of different perspectives on this issue. But it is, as ever with these surveys, a sample of a much broader pool across the combined membership. So everything that we've offered in the report is very much with that very conscious limitation on it, but I do think it gives us a very helpful sample to look at. And then finally, we used the survey results to undertake a whole series of targeted interviews. And again, these were a really helpful complement to the survey data, which has given us breadth, and the targeted interviews gave us depth. So a chance to really talk to individual organizations about some of the activities they were doing, what their hopes for the future were, how they were really finding the process of engaging with this topic, both at a global scale, regional scale, and within their national system. And we were very lucky to have 12 organizations who spoke to us, which again, we try to balance across different perspectives, geographies, disciplines, and affiliations. But that gave us a really helpful mix of insights and to be able to bring into the report. And you'll see that as well as all the charts and the data that's in the report, we've filled it as well with quotes and comments from those who've participated in these interviews. If we can go to the next slide, Carlo. Thank you. Thanks. So just very briefly to give you a taste of where the data comes from the report. As I say, we got a really helpful response rate, over 50 organizations. There's just a few samples down the right-hand side there, but the full list is in the report that you'll find. I think what we were really keen to do was make sure that we looked at the kind of interface between the three organizations, and we were really pleased to get a really good overlap of individual organizations who are linked to individually IAP, ISC, and GYA. I think it's great to have that kind of mix and to be looking at it from that combined perspective. And we were really pleased that with 54 responses across the world, it did give us that chance to look at quite different perspectives, different contexts across this. Thanks so much, Carlo. Very important to us, we did balance that sample as best possible, and we were really pleased actually to get a really great disciplinary balance from the survey respondents. Crucially, I think often we lose sometimes the non-STEM perspective in some of these sorts of exercises, and we were really pleased to get a really strong representation from social sciences and the humanities. And I think that meant that we could really kind of look at this problem in quite a lot of different ways. Thanks, Carlo. And as I say, with the interviews, which I think were really, they're absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed all the conversations we had, and people were incredibly generous with giving us their time. But this was a chance to really sit down with individual organizations and dig into these kind of trends, to ask them about some of the case studies and examples and things that they were working on, to really do that in a way that allowed us to think about what's working in the system and where are people struggling. What is it that's kind of helping unlock progress in some areas and perhaps holding it back in others? And again, we were really pleased to speak to a really wide range of different organizations who look at this problem in very different ways. And that included notably some really nice collaborative interviews, and particularly, drawing the attention to the Netherlands as one example of speaking to the Royal Netherlands Academy there, but also the Young Academy. And, that conversation was really about how those two organizations work really closely together to deliver change in this area. So I was really pleased with the interviews that themselves kind of demonstrated the sector's ability to work together and collaborate to deliver some changes. Thanks, Carlo. And so just the final slide from me is to say that you'll see that the report is structured in a way to try and break up some of the big elements of the conversations and the data that we've gathered. And they really kind of move through, first of all, really trying to understand the nature of evaluation and practices in context. So, where and why are different members evaluating researchers? What is the kind of end goal of that? And how does that affect the way that it's actually done? The report then moves into the perceived challenges. So, what are the barriers facing organizations in this area? Are they internal? Are they external? Really trying to unpick where some of the barriers are at the moment in the system for change. And then linked to that is that kind of appetite for change. So, what is the appetite within different organizations? What are they motivated by? Some really fascinating data about where the drivers are, whether that's kind of internally driven or being encouraged externally. And again, I think there's some fascinating data to be shared on that. And then finally, it was about levers of action. So what ability do organizations have to change things? What's within their power? What agency do they have? And particularly looking at that in different contexts across the world is, researcher assessment happens within a global context, within a globally mobile research system. How do we make sure that the individual levers are used in responsible ways? And finally, I think this will be mentioned at the end by Carlo, but we try to think about the different groups within the combined memberships and their support needs. So there is a real sense that there is a transition underway. Organizations are at different places along that path. Each of them are facing individual challenges based on their own national systems, their own resources, capacity, all those sorts of things. And we really wanted to recognize the fact that different organizations require different types of support to continue their process. So I think that's something that Carlo will come back to, but really important for us that we were able to be very practical about what those support needs were. So I'll hand back over to Carlo to take you through the rest.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Just to stress again that due especially to time limits, I will try to be as short as possible. I will give you partially my own perspective about the results. Everyone is invited to download and read the report, which is really interesting in my view, and can be easily found or linked at least on the website of the three organizations. So the first result or method, if you want, that I think it's important to start with is understanding the context in which these organizations engage into research evaluation. As we mentioned with this report, we were trying to look at what our members of our networks are doing, and therefore, since they are basically not universities or academies, in the vast majority of cases, as you can see, they are engaged in researchers' evaluation for the aim of electing new fellows or members of the organizations themselves. There is a good numbers also of organizations involved in evaluation for the aims of attributing awards, prizes, and so on, or grants to some extent. Fewer are also engaged in assessing existing fellows or renewing memberships. This is, as I said, I think important also to understand the other results that I will be showing. The first one from which I would like to start is what are the methods that these organizations are currently using. As you can see here, a vast majority relies on rather quantitative aspects, even though with important differences. We have highlighted here a few that are in particular interesting, in my view, either for good or bad reasons that I will say in a second. For example, the use of journal level metrics, or instead the use of publication level metrics. But there are also, as I was mentioning, and it's important to highlight, quite a wide range of methods that maybe less frequently, but still sometimes are used, for example, considering participation in teaching activities or mentoring or public engagement and outreach and so on. Now, in terms of asking to these organizations if and how much they are involved in changing or reflecting on research evaluation, you see a very mixed picture from this slide. Mostly organizations probably do not too often reflect on their methods, as you can see from answering that they only renew their procedures when need arises. However, there are some that actually reflect on the issue very, very often, as you can see from the left-hand side graph. On the right-hand side, you have one of the first few things that may be worth discussing later on in our discussion, which is to say, who is involving in, understanding, discussing, possibly revising the process of assessment. Vast majority of cases, of course, the leadership, I would argue, it is their role, but there is a relatively limited, in my view, involvement instead of the individuals who are assessed. Very often we might find a lack, for example, of feedback mechanisms and so on. Concerning the organization's desire for change or intention to reform the way they are assessing researchers, roughly, quantitatively speaking, Culture Base found that 1/3 of our member organizations or our networks have already implemented some changes, and around 2/3 haven't yet. As you can see, a few are considering but not yet implementing changes, whereas possibly many, about half, are not yet considering these kind of issues. Where is reform occurring? A lot of times in young academies, according to the report. Possibly this is explained by one of the findings that Ben was already anticipating before, which is very often the push for change comes from inside the organization. So it's more of an endogenous process rather than being mandated from outside, from founders and so on. But why are instead not many other organizations engaging in change? A few reasons arise from the qualitative interviews that Bennett mentioned. One, there is a concern, for example, that changing the rules with respect to what has been perceived or what is perceived to be the rule at the international level could pose limits to mobility of researchers. So if one country alone changes significantly or departs from what is perceived to be the standard practice, then questions arise about, will people involved in this organization be able to be recognized, maybe to change jobs or to change institutions over time going in other countries. Another issue that I think echoes also some of the findings that we had already highlighted in the first report, that also is freely available online. There could be a global north, global south divide here, in the sense that there is an issue to ensure that future methods are equitable, which is not given, of course. So the new processes must be, of course, very well reflected upon before changes are made, as well as in the first report, in this case, we did have interviewed participants who were actually complaining that after a huge effort in understanding the rules of the games, now some felt that the rich countries are changing the rules again. So not feeling involved enough into a global discussion has been an issue that also arises in this second report. However, I would say that another possible barrier for reform, arises from what I myself found the most surprising, possibly even a little bit shocking result from the quantitative analysis of this report, which is the views about the possible impact of the current research processes. As you see here, there is quite a good number of members or network organizations that think that the current methods of research evaluations have a strong or a mildly positive impact. Relatively few think that there are a mild or strong negative impacts of evaluation. Now, it's important to take the contextual information in mind. We are talking about these organizations' internal methods. So, for example, arguably, some members of the scoping group are of the view that this reflects the fact that either academies, in particular, well, both senior and young academies actually have a wider set of criteria and methods than universities or research institutions in certain countries. So maybe their methods are perceived to be already better according to some. Some members of the scoping group also said that maybe recognizing excellence, in a sense, which is the objective of the academies, could be considered to be easier than evaluating the whole research ecosystem. Still, I myself am a little bit hesitant to have this rather positive view, to be totally honest, because in fact, there is a huge literature. Part it is summarized in this report, part there is a survey in the previous report, and then, of course, there is a whole scientific field of which you might know, with scientific journals such as, I don't know, research policy, scientometrics, quantitative studies of science. There is a huge field of research showing that there are many negative consequences of current research methods, ranging from indirect discrimination and goal displacement to a more positive case for the opportunity to try new methods of research evaluation, such as, first of all, trying to preserve or uphold research quality, trying to increase inclusion and diversity within the research ecosystem, making finally research a global public good, which is also the pitch of one of the three organizations, and as well as responding to new changes, for example, natural language, generative AI, and so on, which also pose new challenges. So there is a strong literature suggesting that there is a need for reform, and personally, the fact that many organizations apparently are not always in agreement with what is considered to be the consensus on this field is, in my view, a little bit even problematic, I want to say. However, this is not to say that change is easy or will happen immediately. To be clear, first of all, nobody has yet understood what is the perfect method of research evaluation. It surely will not be the same everywhere, no size fits all. Both metrics-driven and qualitative forms of evaluation are imperfect. So many of the cautious reasons for a more slow and gradual approach do exist and should be recognized. However, there is surely a value added in the cooperation of our three organizations in trying to move forward with this debate. One is clearly the very wide scope, both in geographical terms and in terms of the kind of institutions or bodies that can be mobilized within the networks of the three organizations. And from the report, the need for support for international collaboration emerges quite clearly as a priority for many of the interviewed survey respondents, both in the qualitative and in the quantitative part of the analysis, as well as many are already moving, according to the interviews, but also from our literature survey, many are already moving, for example, in regional or discipline-specific initiatives. CoARA, promoted by the European Union, is probably the most famous right now. DORA is probably the most well-established and older, but there are also, for example, important efforts going on in Latin America and so on. There are, well, let me move a little bit faster. So there is an appetite for support. There is a demand from many organizations for even using the convening power of the three organizations in terms of providing a coordination. Let me say that possibly because I'm a social scientist, and from looking from a hammer, everything looks like an arrow. It seems to me that what emerges quite clearly from this report is what we call a collective action problem. There is a demand for change, even though with some heterogeneity, that I will say in a second, but many players are hesitant or skeptical to move alone because of several disadvantages of moving first or not moving everyone in the same direction. In this sense, the report concludes with identifying 4 typologies of member organizations or networks involved by our 3 organizations. Some that are already moving in a sense themselves. These are often the organizations more clearly focused on early career researchers, for example, the young academies. Some are cautious adopters. They would like to do a little bit more, but not if this implies taking too many risks, maybe moving in the wrong direction or moving alone. Some are interested, but they feel excluded from the debate or from the experimentation, especially, as I was mentioning, in the Global South. They may have more difficulties in having their voice heard, and they would like to join an international debate. And some finally are instead quite new to the agenda, and possibly, as we saw from that problematic result that I was mentioning before, some even possibly don't fully see many reasons for change, to be totally honest. Now, the report concludes with 5 suggestions or recommendations that the 3 organizations do together some kind of activities. For example, trying to include in the global conversation those that currently feel unable or insufficiently included, trying to put their name and credibility behind the form agenda, supporting intervention that have reached a certain tipping point. I'm thinking here, for example, of narrative CV, which has been discussed several times in the preparation of the report. Protecting researcher mobility that I was mentioning. If different countries go too much in different dimensions, this can create a problem in terms of recognizing competences, skills, and expertise developed in different countries, as well as promoting the exchange of ideas and good practices, even bad practices, in the sense that if there are lessons to be learned from other players. But as I was mentioning at the beginning, I also would like to raise instead 3 more personal points, just to conclude. So they do not necessarily reflect the views of the leadership nor of the consulting body that I set up drafting the report. I think that there is wide room for a collaboration among the 3 organizations in terms of, first of all, stimulating a global and inclusive debate, currently there is this risk of regionalization of the debates, even though some members, for example, the Global Young Academy is involved in CoARA, for example, trying to make it a more global discussion. It is true that for the moment, you could say that the kind of debates they are having in Latin America are not fully reflected in Europe and vice versa, just to make a specific example. I'm thinking of the importance of engaging, for example, other bodies from UNESCO to global and regional networks of universities and so on. There is a need for intellectual leadership. It would be very important to convene a series of discussion fora, for example, on the impact of recent technological advances on research evaluation and peer review, or reforming peer review, or the use of metrics and so on. One could even think of consensus conferences, for example. Then it's important also to collect, analyze, and discuss evidence. It's important to facilitate the discussion on what to do, because, as I was mentioning, there is a collective problem, a collective action problem here. Many organizations would like to proceed, but not alone or not be the first one to do so. And this also implies that there is a need possibly to coordinate specific innovations. Can we find a way in which, of course, democratically, inclusive, and globally, we could talk about promoting specific initiatives rather than talking about reforming assessment in general. These, in my view, or from my own personal perspective, are the big rooms for cooperation. And I think the fact that our organizations have different kinds of members, as well as a global reach, is a tremendous value added. So I hope it will be useful to produce change, actually.
Thank you, Carlo. Thank you, Ben, for this very comprehensive presentations and remarks. Deliberately, we scheduled this meeting as a regular Zoom meeting and not as a webinar, so that we have an interactive discussion and Q&A. So I welcome anyone who either has a comment or reaction to what you heard today. Any questions of clarification, please go ahead. You can raise your electronic hand or just unmute yourself and please make your comment or ask your question. Very good. I see Martin, please go ahead.
Hi. There appears to be something that is quite odd about human psychology. If you want to be successful in research, you have to move first. Why are people so reluctant to believe in first mover advantage? It's actually the same thing if you run a small business successfully, you have to move first. And still, humans fear change, which is often not rational and sometimes in contradiction to evidence. So how can we convince people that moving first could actually be to their advantage?
Thank you, Martin. And I see you're connecting from sunny Scotland. Carlo or Ben, anyone else from IAP-GYA-ISC side who would like to address this provocative question and very correct. One thing I'm not surprised is with the human psychology that does not make sense, but Ben, go ahead.
Sure, maybe I can jump in first, but yeah, I think it's an excellent question, and it's a real dilemma, I think, for the entire researcher community, which is there is this sense of reluctance and hesitation for people to take that first move. And it's a real shame because a lot of the places and the organizations that we spoke to in producing this report were kind of beginning to kind of move the kind of progress forward and really seeing the benefits of that and really being very deeply proud about bringing those changes in. But there was a sense of trepidation about the pace of change and making sure that that allowed people space to kind of adjust. And I think that's one of the challenges inherent in the researcher field and as a career path is that the sense of agency is quite a difficult one, that individual researchers are seeking to build their own careers and build their own pathways in a system that has its own set of rules, which are quite difficult to change. And I think that's one of the big challenges where I think cooperation and collaboration across different researcher communities can make a huge difference, because it gives people that sense of belief and trust in the system, keeping up with how they are demonstrating their success and demonstrating their excellence, because otherwise people do end up being overlooked. And I think that's a real challenge, is that we're in a system where the individual penalty for moving first is very, very, very high. Because it's your entire career, it's your ability to pay your mortgage or pay your rent. So I think there's a real sense that the personal cost has to be taken into account when making changes. And I think it was one of the reasons why some of the really good examples of change we saw were being done really thoughtfully with individuals in mind, which is how do we create a space and a pathway for people to move, but at the same time for institutions to take their responsibility very seriously, is having the ability to drive that forward. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Martin, and I think it's a challenge that does need cooperation. I think that's the solution to it.
Thank you, Ben. Vanessa, and then Yancy.
Yeah, I won't be long. Thanks for that great question, Martin. And I think it speaks to one of the case studies that are highlighted in the report here, where I think the Zimbabwe Young Academy of Science has actually moved ahead and started to do research assessment differently. But, there is again, a difference between a sort of small young academy doing something like this and a big player, doing something like this. And it's just at the moment, the way that, I think people take their cues from these big established organizations. So I think as momentum becomes gathered and some of the big organizations decide to follow suit, I think you'll see a lot more momentum.
Thank you. Yancy, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Yancy. I'm a postdoc in the University of Washington in Seattle. And I was listening to Carlos' presentation, and I'm wondering, Carlo, it seems like, for example, there is this global lack of coordination, and I'm wondering what can your organization, the GYA, IAP, and ISC do to help in this, and what are you planning to do to help on this? Thank you.
Well, if I could also start from Martin's question, I think one of the issues is that as much as we are a global community, we are also legitimately, in my view, a community of competing institutions or individuals. And so rather than a problem of human psychology, as I said, I think it's a problem of collective action, in the sense that those who are already very well established don't fully have a lot of incentives for change because they are doing so well right now. Those who are not that much established don't have probably the institutional power to produce change. So as much as in theory or in principle, many of us would agree on at least some specific changes, it's difficult to understand who should start given the current, institutional setup. Having said this, to Jens's question, I think, as I mentioned, if we think that the problem is one of coordination, probably one of the ideas would be to try and create forums for discussion, hopefully also sort, as I mentioned, of consensus conferences to decide specific changes, maybe once at a time, in which we can have a really scientific approach, discussing should we do this, what are the costs, what are the benefits, the advantages and the risks, and then we try to take, I don't want to say a global decision because it would be, of course, utopian, but at least if we could recommend the adoption of things that almost everybody could do, then it would have a different sort of legitimacy. So to me, it's an issue of producing coordination.
Thank you, Carla, and I would echo exactly what you said. What we don't want is to continue with these good efforts, but the fragmentation of the good efforts. Vanessa?
And Rania, on that point, if you like, I mean, I think the question that Yenzi's asked is answered quite well in the recommendations to this report. And I think even the discussion that we're having now the promotion of the report itself through the webinar, through the publication, is part of the efforts to champion these kinds of voices and to give some credibility to existing efforts. So even though I think many of our institutions only do a very limited fragment of research evaluations, if you think about it, most of it actually happens at universities, raising the profile and the issue, I think is really what our three institutions can probably contribute.
Thank you. Let me ask our participants whether there are any efforts from your own organizations that you're aware of and were not captured in this report. And if that is the case, I would like to ask you to briefly describe those efforts. Maybe as part of this discussion and because of our role in networking as well, are there any efforts that you were particularly interested in learning more about? Okay, Yancy, I wonder if you would like to take the floor again and elaborate a bit on the US efforts.
Thank you. Well, I was based in Ireland and I just moved to the US like a year ago. But in this year, I have learned that it's a different landscape from different countries in where I have lived, where there's more of a unionized or like a general consensus of approach. Here, like institutions have a high degree of independence, and they can go about their decisions in very different ways. But I have seen that several research funders and several open science organizations have gathered momentum at the moment. For example, recently the NIH has organized a workshop where they're challenging, for example, the rise of or how to deal with publication bias. And one of the main aspects of that was research evaluation, the role that research assessment has in producing these publication bias, driving the publication bias. Another initiatives have been taken by different independent universities. For example, I have known in Virginia, there's a couple of universities that are now removing the mention of any impact factors or anything like that. There's some universities in California also moving towards that direction. So it is fragmented because it's how the US operates. It's very different from Europe, for example, that there's more like a centralized, can be centralized in a bit better, but there is some action going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Yancy. Thanks for that. And NIH, of course, is the National Institutes of Health here in the United States. Martin?
So one interesting factor that became obvious when looking at applications for membership of the Global Young Academy is that the assumption of normative career paths just doesn't work. And many evaluation schemes implicitly assume just that. So you can come up with easy metrics to compare researchers at MIT and at Princeton University, but if you compare that to somebody at the University of Ouagadougou, then suddenly it becomes obvious that it doesn't make much sense. It never made sense in the first place, actually. Interesting side effect is if we look at the membership selection of the Global Young Academy, something that we don't see is a gender disparity. And that might be a side effect to abandon or not to enforce a concept of normative career paths.
Thanks for this comment, Martin. And I will encourage anyone who wants to react to what is discussed here to please unmute yourself. Any other efforts from member organizations and activities that were not captured in the report and you would like to share? And as you're thinking, another question from us is, what would you as members of IAP, IAC, and GYA would like to see our three entities working towards? Yancy?
The recommendations given by Carlo in the presentation. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other views? Any comments on the usefulness of the report? How you will be using it either at an individual level or institutional level? And that's the question to young academies and senior academies, and of course, all the other organizations of our IAC, IAP, and GYA. Okay, Yancy says that she will be using it as a baseline information for different initiatives. Vanessa, please go ahead.
I think, I mean, I'm using the report really as a kind of a blueprint for us moving forward. But I think what could be useful in addition to the report is to collect some of the work that's coming out of CoARA and similar initiatives where you really are finding, you know, these are kind of high-level recommendations. And at some point you need to develop these into metrics that you can actually apply, you know, when you're doing researcher evaluation, whether it's of researchers or for fellows or for prizes or those kinds of things. I think finding and trying those kinds of metrics and implementing them is probably a key next step.
Very good point, Vanessa, and something we also discussed internally. Okay, any other comments? Anything you would like to add or bring to our attention related to this presentation today? Okay, Lucia, would you like to unmute yourself and talk us through your comment?
Hi, hello. I work at the IAP now at the Trieste Secretariat, but I'm basing my question on my experience with the Organization for Women in Science for the developing world. And now we have the same problem when evaluating grant proposals. And we often base our merit on just the age index and number of publications, which is not exactly easy to do when dealing with applications from women from developing countries. And we continue seeing this disparity also in the citations, number of citations of women, of Black women. Also, there is this whole movement in the US citing Black women, etc. So I was wondering, I was hoping actually the working group would have some ideas or suggestions on how to fill those gaps, on how to better evaluate research.
Anyone who would like to take on this question?
Well, I don't know if Ben would like to say something about that. In the discussions, we did consider some of the specific proposals that have been, people are experimenting, organizations and so on. For example, I see here among the participants in this call, there is Sean Saccariu from the Luxembourg Research funds, they are very much, for example, proposing the idea of narrative CVs. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best way to go. I'm just saying we did discuss about some of these aspects. So I don't know if Sean would like to step in and say a couple of words about that, for example.
Sure, you put me on the spot. I'll jump in. So for us, it's not about the evaluation criteria themselves, right? But it depends, of course, because we as a funder have our own evaluation criteria. We do not. We are a signatory of DORA and CoARA. We use no metrics. We actively tell our reviewers and evaluators not to use these things. And if we see them, we stop them from using that. But it's about changing the way people talk and the words they use and the mentality. And this is done by changing what people think about and what you put in front of them. So for example, the narrative CV is an excellent way of doing this, because instead of a structured CV, or a bullet point CV where you have just list of publications and grant money and stuff like this, you allow applicants to tell their story and to contextualize their achievements and their broader range of achievements aside from just the traditional ones. And this already kind of seeds in the evaluators what they're going to talk about, right? Because if an applicant talks about H-index in Nature papers, then that's what the evaluators are going to talk about. If the applicant talks about mentoring and societal impact and all those sorts of things, then that's what the evaluators are going to talk about, right? So you're changing the mindset. I have a bunch of other examples of stuff as well. The other thing we do is priming the evaluators, right? Because you can set the evaluation criteria kind of nice and broadly to incentivize not using these sorts of improper metrics, but it's about kind of priming them. So we have a video, I can put the link in the chat, that we show before every panel, where we tell our panel members, these are the things you do to think about, what you have to think about when evaluating in kind of a responsible way. It's a co-production with DORA, so it's branded as DORA. It's for everyone to use. And it just helps prime them to think about, oh, I'm not going to talk about H-indexes and metrics and stuff like this. I'm going to talk about these other things, because that's what's in the forefront of my mind. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for these comments. Peter McGrath.
Yes, hello. I'm coming back to your question of how we as the three organizations might go forward together. And I don't have any definitive answers. One thing would be to reach out to those organizations and to brainstorm together, the DORA and CoARA and the others, what do they think we can do? What is missing? How do we, in Dominic's word, change the human psychology? My only thought along these lines is that there are networks of universities out there. I can think of the Association of African Universities, for example, or the Agence Universitaire Francophonie, that links Canadian French and the French-speaking African universities. So getting away from Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, Princeton, and so on, and focusing on those others who could leapfrog ahead, in Dominic's words. With this morning, I met with a delegation from the Beijing Association of Science and Technology, and they were saying that they had a network just formed of the 57 top universities in China, and maybe this is another opportunity, sort of getting away from the traditional leaders and proposing some innovative ways to move ahead with these groups. Nothing concrete, I'm afraid, but just throwing some ideas on the table.
Thank you, Peter. I don't see any other hands raised. Let me see if Beate or Vanessa, if you would like to make any quick comments before we close.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Rania. Well, there were quite a few members of the GYA talking, and I think it became clear that it's sometimes much easier from an early career institution to change instead of a big tanker. But I think, well, many things have been said, but developing an example in practice where we can collaborate either in a certain corner, which is a cross-cutting corner, cross-cutting the globe, cross-cutting a certain discipline, or well, we have to see where we could find an example where we can showcase and really move forward and encourage. I really did like what Martin said in the beginning. Researchers usually go forward and are used to being alone in the field and the first movers. And in this, it's like, well, everybody looks to the other who is moving first, and how to overcome this. And my idea would be to perhaps we can find an example where we can showcase together and practically showcase that it's worthwhile being the first mover.
Thank you, Beat. And I bet as all these efforts, including CoARA and DORA, are becoming more mature, we will be able to find these success examples. Vanessa?
I think from my side, I just wanted to say that we also have to have a little courage. You know, I don't think we need to be afraid of getting stuff wrong. It's already wrong. We just need to get it a little less wrong as we move towards getting the right solution. So we don't need to worry about finding a perfect model now. We just have to incrementally move to something better.
Thank you, Vanessa. So with that said, I want to thank you all for participating today, especially Ben and Carlo for very nicely walking us through the report's methodology and key findings. We have a session organized for tomorrow. It falls 3 o'clock in the morning, my time in Washington, D.C. So from that, you can calculate what it is in your country. I don't encourage you to attend that one as well, as it will be more or less a repeated list of the presentations that we had today. But please encourage your colleagues who you think may be interested in attending to do so. And I'm adding the registration link in the chat box if you want to transfer it to them. Again, thank you very much for this effort, and I suspect for your attendance, and I suspect that this is not the last time you hear from IAP, GYA, and ISC on this effort. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Rania.